Welcome to the Black Magic Woman podcast with Tanarra Capital.
I'd like to begin this podcast by acknowledging the Kabi Kabi peoples who are the traditional owners of where this podcast is being recorded. I'd also like to extend my respects to their elders, past and present, and acknowledge that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. We have never ceded our sovereignty as First Nations peoples living in this country, now known as Australia. And I always start with an acknowledgement of country because it is an ancient diplomatic protocol that has been practiced by all Aboriginal peoples right across this country since millennia. And in terms of this podcast, it's all about conversations. It's getting to know people based on who they are and not what they do, even though what they do is important. In Aboriginal culture, relationships, human relationships come first. So on that note, my guest today is Brother Dean Parkin, and I have never met you until I've seen you on the screen today, but we know of each other. And my uncle, who's younger than me, that I call my cousin, but in Murray Way is my uncle, Carver, is basically married to your sister. So our families are connected through Stephen Carver, but also just the work that we do, that we're also connected and know a lot of people. What is it called when you've got the same friends? Associate, we got the, I don't know.
Peers?
Peers?
Comrades? I don't know.
Like we've got the same colleagues and friends, and we're in the same circles. But on that note, look, I'm going to hand over to you to introduce yourself. Can you please tell our listeners, you know, who you are and where you're from, where you grew up?
Thanks, Mara. Wonderful to be here. Obviously, firstly, though, I'd also like to acknowledge that I'm on the lands of the Gadigal peoples of the Eora Nations. Here in Sydney, I pay my respects to their elders past and present. And I bring greetings from my peoples, the Quandamooka peoples from Minjerribah, North Stradbroke Island. So just across the way from the Kabi Kabi mob there, we share a border with the Kabi Kabi. And obviously acknowledge the work of my old people as well, both those that are still with us, those that have gone before, that have laid the path for us all. We only are here and live the lives that we do and do the work that we do because of the foundations that they've laid for us, and it's a great privilege for me with having my old people around, that they are still there giving me advice and wisdom, and I'm able to tap into deep wells of knowledge and sometimes just listening to what they have to say, which is just so important to us all. Great to be here yarning with you, and really happy to talk a little bit about my story as well. Obviously, as I said, I'm from the Quandamooka people, so North Stradbroke Island, and saltwater mob. That's my mum's country. That's where my mum was born, and all my mum's family, and still live there today. As it turns out, I was born away from country, and mum and dad were up in central Queensland for work, had moved the family up there, my older brother and older sister, and so I was born away from country and lived effectively my whole life off country. Up in central Queensland, up in a coal mining town where Dad worked. But Mum was always sharing stories and telling us about life back at home. On the island, we would always visit multiple times a year. We got to know that road between Moranbah and Brisbane very, very well because we used to drive up and down, whether it would be for funerals, whether it be for family gatherings. A lot of funerals. That was a lot of the time, as everybody knows. That's where we come together and be together. Mob also family would also come up and visit us up there, which was always something that made Mum really happy to see her family do that, take that time to travel up there. So I grew up and lived away, but also always connected, whether it was Christmas times, coming home, spending time there. I just knew wherever I was in the world, and I've lived around the place, up and down the East Coast. I spent 4 years living in London and traveling through Europe and doing things like that. But I always knew where my home was. It's just such a simple concept. such a simple feeling, knowing that my spirit is connected to that country there.
And what beautiful country it is. I had to interrupt and just say to people that I get to go to Strait, not as often as I would like to, but my sister married a local. Mm-hmm. So I've got Quandamooka kids or, nieces and nephews that get to roam that island every single day. And I am so envious of the lifestyle that they get to live. So, yeah, absolutely paradise, right? When you started talking about Quandamooka people and Quandamooka country and Minjerribah, I started to think of my sister Caillou. If you're listening, sis, big shout out to you and Paddy.
We got a beautiful place just down the road, actually, from Paddy and Caillou there, just down at Myra Springs. And it's a very special, our whole island is special, but it's a very special place along there where fresh water comes out of the ground, and it meets where the salt water comes in, where the tide comes in. So all the way along that stretch of land there are significant sites and old gathering spots and middens where mob have been gathering for a long, long time. You can see it because there's fresh water and there's salt water, so there's food and there's drinking water. So it makes sense. And so it's the level of peace and calm and connectedness that I've had since I've moved back has been amazing. It's the safest I've ever felt in my life. Just being back there, knowing that mob used to have been there for thousands of years, and knowing that that's it for me. I'm not going anywhere else.
But them spirits, them old people are looking after you. That feeling of being safe. That a lot of non-Indigenous people won't feel that feeling because it's not their country. But they can feel it if they want to, when they build relationships with us as First Nations peoples. And they start talking to them old people to guide them and protect them and to, look after their families while they're visiting different, mobs' countries. Like they can feel that safety net and connectedness and sense of belonging if they had a relationship with us. And I love the fact that a lot of our mob talk about the fact that we can't even describe what it feels like when we're on our country. It's something that you can't really put into words. And I'm sure if we spoke our own language, it would be able to sum it up quite easily. But in English, it's hard to just sum up how you feel, how your spirit feels. A lot of mobs say that when they go back to country, it's like their cup is full.
Yeah, it's very much like that. It's a strange feeling. It almost feels, for me, when I was away, and every time I'd come home, because the thing is also, the feeling would start earlier than just the island, because our country goes across the sea, obviously, and then onto the mainland as well. So you're actually on Quandamooka country a bit before you get to the island, but it is that getting on that boat and getting across is very special, and it's always felt like if you've ever been away from your nan for too long, and you come home to your nan and she gives you that hug. I mean, my nan passed away many years ago, but she gives you that hug. She obviously loves to see you there, but also looking at you going, you spent too long away. So it's that feeling of coming home, and I got the great privilege now of having that all the time. So it's very, very special, and I think I'm also still getting used to it. I'm also still taking the time to reconnect again, and taking time just to spend, as the seasons change, understanding how the land and all the different animals, wildlife around the place change, and the flowers and everything. It's a great feeling of exploration and learning. I had Patrick come down actually a little while ago, looking around, and we're thinking, we can do some stuff here when the cool season's on. And so, it's
how much knowledge does that man have when you think about it?
It's unbelievable.
He's a living encyclopedia. And we went up to visit recently, and we're sitting on the top of that hill where they built their house, and just looked down of what they get to wake up to every single day. And then he was pointing out different things and just telling us different things. And I was just sitting there just thinking, my nieces and nephews,
Mm.
they get this, they get it, they hear it, they're living it every single day. But I want to talk about your two sisters over there. I know that when we were there doing the tour, we stopped off and had a look at Made on Minjerribah. So you've got two sisters that you haven't spoken about yet, and hopefully one day I'll get them on the podcast. So can you share with us a little bit about your family? I don't know if you got a brother. You just got two sisters?
Yeah, no, I do.
You got a brother?
Yeah,
Another brother?
Yeah. So mum and dad are on the island there. Dad's from white Australian, English heritage from the north of England, from Gippsland, Victoria. So son of a dairy farmer, and obviously mum being born there on country. Got an older brother, Corey. He lives there on the island. Has been on the island for a long, long time. Working in various roles there. Good machine operator. Knows his way around machines. Does the big brother. Really good footballer too in his day. Delvine, my older sister, Delvine Cockatoo Collins now. So married to Shay Cockatoo Collins, the former Essendon and Port Power footballer.
Yeah.
Delvine is an absolutely brilliant artist, an immensely creative person. I'm going to say something pretty bad. It's going to sound pretty bad, actually. She was always a really good athlete when I was growing up. So she and Kathy Freeman were coming through at the same time, and so her and Kathy are quite good friends. We're family friends with the Freemans because they grew up out near where we grew up in Minjerribah. So I always knew Delvine as an athlete. I knew she could run. She's good at long jumps. She's good at a whole bunch of things. But it wasn't up until about, and this is serious, it wasn't up until about 10 or 15 years ago, 10 years ago, I'd say, that I worked out how amazing she was as an artist. I didn't know that she had this just incredible talent and skill. And so to see her do what she's doing now with her art, her business, and that's the wonderful thing about it too, is that she's not just a wonderfully, insanely creative person. She's a good business person too. And she's grown her business in a really challenging time. And you'd probably appreciate too the challenges of growing and sustaining a business throughout the COVID period and everything that's done. Particularly, for example, as an artist, where a lot of your stuff at the time was very much in the shop, people coming into the shop and so forth, to then when nobody was coming, when the island was literally locked down and you couldn't get across. Delvine's just adapted, changed, grown just from strength to strength. So she's amazing.
And can you tell our listeners, she was in a swimsuit calendar, yeah?
Well, she's done a bit of that too. And look,
I remember seeing her strut her stuff on the catwalk in the Queen Street Mall with Liza Fraser Gooder, or Liza Maguire now, another sister girl that I had on the podcast. And she had a business partner, Dina Paulson.
Yes.
I don't know Dina as well as I know Liza, but I was actually in the crowd looking at these deadly black women, and Delvine was one of them. So it's not like I've idolised her, but as a young girl, thought one day I might be a model, but I was always too short. But I absolutely was inspired to see black women grace the stage, the centre stage in the Queen Street Mall in Brisbane, in swimsuit, looking absolutely beautiful. And I'm pretty sure that, that calendar was sold, definitely all over the country, but I'm pretty sure there was something with going international with that Janali models that had some international exposure. So
yeah, absolutely. It was Janali, that's right.
Yeah.
It was the Janali calendar. Yeah. No, that was fantastic. And again, a great initiative. They got some serious exposure around that. That was really, really, really well done. So yeah, you'll have to get Delvine on to tell her full story.
I can't wait. So Sister Delvine, you're hearing it here now. Your brother's saying you got to jump on.
Get on board.
Can't
absolutely.
wait.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
And so I came after, so Corey, Delvine, and then me, and then younger sister Steph, who is Well, I've run out of words.
How do you
describe
sum up
how
your
awesome she
family?
is.
I know. Just too much talent.
I look, yeah. You should talk to the two women in our family. They're the really go-getters and the smart and the creative ones. Steph has just started her own law firm. Like it's an amazing, somewhat surreal thing to think that my younger sister has started her own law firm with Cassie Lang. The two of them going into partnership as Parallax Legal. Two young, incredibly accomplished black women starting their law firm. It's just amazing. And Steph's, she's got an incredible array of experience, in particular in intellectual property law. She's done a lot of work with artists, our mob artists, making sure that their rights are protected, that we're actually they're getting good deals in good, making sure that their art, their labour, their creativity is valued, and making sure that it's protected.
Yeah.
And I think it's an incredibly important role to play. And
so if there's listeners, Braz, if there are people who are listening that are artists or even aspiring artists, reach out to Parallax Legal, reach out to sister girl Steph Parkin. She knows what she's talking about. Steph is quite young. She's quite young, but has accomplished a lot in her young career as an IP lawyer, but now partnering up with Cassie Lang, another deadly, she's a Bundjalung woman too, same country as me. Let's give them a shout out. They're on LinkedIn. I saw recently that they let everybody know on LinkedIn, and they're very new, in the last kind of month. They put that message out there on LinkedIn that they have now set up this partnership, this law firm together. So let's leave that for them, because I'm going to have them on my podcast to hopefully get them on there to tell their stories, because they're important stories that need to be told. A lot of our mob don't have the opportunity to share their stories, or they see it as big noting, and they don't want to big note themselves.
No, it's true. We've got to do more of it, I think. And it's not about big noting. You can if you do it the wrong way, or it's all about who you are. But we've got to be able to celebrate excellence. We've got to be able to celebrate excellence, because a lot of people talk too much about the downsides, the disadvantaged sides. We get a lot of that, and we get a lot of it imposed upon us. And if others aren't going to talk about our excellence and the brilliance of who we are as people, as mob, as business people, then we've got to do that. And we're going to do it proudly and not worry about whether people think that maybe we're tooting our own horn too much. We've got to do it because we've got to get those perceptions shifted about who we are, because between you and I and then everybody else that's listening, we know of brilliant people, but we just got to tell those stories more.
Yeah. And I guess I use my LinkedIn platform to do exactly that. And I use this platform to do exactly that, and invite people on like yourself to share, what you do and why you do what you do, or even how did you achieve what you've achieved in your life. And I want to go back now just a few steps. You've been involved with the Uluru Statement from the Heart, but I want to go back. How did you even get involved? Have you been to uni? What have you studied? What's been your, kind of main income, or your career profession? What have you done to then be able to be where you are now? Can you share a little bit more with our listeners?
Well, it started very early on. I've actually got, and I've kept this. I did a little, you do those little projects in primary school, and I've got one in year 2. So I was 7 years old, and it talks about land rights. So that was back in 7 years old, 1998.
Showing your age now.
Yeah, I know. So
the early 90s. Yep.
Late 80s.
Late 80s.
Late 80s, yeah. Bicentenary year, 1988. So, and again, this goes back to the things that Mum's always been talking to us about, right? And this was well before social media and well before anything like that. This was just Mum telling us stories about home, about the struggle, about and for many of us, in some ways it's sad, but for many of us, we're born into a life of politics. Like it's not something that you can just pick up and drop off, because it's part of who you are, even from a very, very young age. And I think some non-Indigenous people find it very, very difficult to understand that, about how early it is. So it started early. I did finish high school. I went to boarding school in Brisbane for the last 3 years just to finish off, so mostly public school. Went to university. University was, I did a Bachelor of Arts with majors in politics and journalism. And the thing I found about university was it wasn't really about the degree that shaped my future. It was about the fact that I had the ability to finish a 3 or 4 year course. As a younger person, it can be a really challenging thing. There's a lot of things going on, a lot of distractions, and so the ability to sit down, commit to something, and stick to it. In fact, when I first started out working, person that I spoke to, I wouldn't call him a mentor. We didn't spend that long together, but I'd never forget this bit of advice. He said he was working in the finance sector, and he said when he employs a person that's just finished uni as a sort of trainee or somebody that's just starting in their career, he spends the first 6 to 12 months getting them to unlearn what they learnt at university, because the actual knowledge and the subject itself wasn't that useful. But the fact that they shown a determination and a commitment to stick something through was the thing that actually was the thing that attracted him to them. So that stuck with me, and I think that's been the case for my university. I've had a very diverse career. It doesn't follow any sort of rhyme or reason. I only worked in a little bit in government right at the very beginning, only a couple of years. I found government, for me personally, and I know I'll say this, I know many of our mob are doing really, really hard work working in the public service across the piece, and I have a lot of respect for our mob that are doing that, because it can be a very, very difficult place to work. It's just not for me. I find it too restrictive and too. I think I'd get in too much trouble if I worked in the public service for any length of time. I've chosen not to. Have spent a little bit of time in politics. As I said, I spent 4 years in London, which was an interesting experience, because there, for the purposes of employment, for the purposes of identification, being an Aboriginal person didn't really mean anything. There was no job or opportunity or door that had a particular opening with related to my identity. I was just another person in a massive city, trying to make my own way. And in a way, that was quite a nice period just to do that.
Just to live. Yeah. Anilula talks about going to China and just being a person, just being a human being and not being treated any differently, just living and being. And then she came back to Australia and said it was the most saddest thing for her to comprehend is that she had to leave her own country to experience what it felt like to be a human being.
It's a really interesting. It's a really interesting concept, and I don't want, and I'm sure Auntie Lilla's experience is completely unique as well. But it doesn't mean you forget who you are. It doesn't mean your sense of identity about who you are as a black fella changes. But the way that the world perceives you is very, very different. It's very different. And so then the way that you then interact with that is very different. And so that was a very useful experience for me to have. When I came back, and I was always coming back because I wanted to get back involved in issues that are important to us. My first work was up in Cape York with Noel Pearson. I spent a year up in the Cape, up there, and that was a really eye-opening experience as well, to see what was happening with those mobs up there and the challenges and some of the work that they were doing to try and carve out their own solutions. And so that was phenomenal. I've variously worked in corporate management consultancies. I've worked for myself. as an independent consultant. I have to say working for myself is one of the best things I can do. It's a wonderful plan B if I ever blow up my career, that I can just go back to working for myself.
There's nothing more liberating than just being your own boss.
I highly recommend it. I know it's not everybody's cup of tea because, as you say, there's uncertainty and
the security,
you're not guaranteed insecurity. But I'm very happy if that's if nothing else, I'll just go back and do that. Mm-hmm. I've worked for an investment bank as an investment analyst. Really random career change, and I think that's probably been one of my. I wasn't very good at it, but so don't ask me.
But you had to go.
But look, it was, and again, it was a wonderful way of learning new skills, a learning of ways people approach and think about problems in a different way, completely different problems. And this is the thing: it doesn't matter what you're doing. You can always pick up a skill or a capability from a particular situation, whether you're doing work out in your yard, or you're trying to fix a bit of machinery, or you're working on numbers, or you're painting a picture. You can always learn something and pick something up and take it on to the next thing that you do. And I learned some incredible skills working in that investment bank that you wouldn't think necessarily going back and working with mob on things like the Uluru statement. It kind of fits, but it actually provides some really interesting tools. So that's. So the story of how I got involved then through all of that was just networks, connections, and making the most of opportunities. I've been lucky in some ways, but in some ways it's not about luck. It's about doors open, or doors are presented and you choose to open the door as an opportunity. The thing is, those opportunities are only as good as the work you put into making them happen. And more opportunities come the harder you work. You know, I'm not a golfer, but there's a golf saying is, the harder I work, the luckier I get. And it's the same thing with career. The harder you work, the more opportunities seem to present, and the better you get at taking them. So just I think just through working with mobs across the country, local, regional, national, urban, regional, remote, on all sorts of different community development projects on different times of my career. When the Referendum Council was set up to talk about the thing, Indigenous constitutional recognition, that led to the Uluru statement, then people said, well, do you want to come work with us to help facilitate the conversation so mob can have proper conversations and be properly heard in the lead up to all of that? So that's how I got involved.
Wow. Well, we had Thomas Mayer and also Professor Megan Davis on the podcast that was able to shed some light into the Uluru Statement from the Heart. What has it been like for you? Because, you know, I've heard their experiences and their involvement, and I've also heard mob in community, right, that there's either people that are for it or against it, or they're just not educated enough on the topic to then make a decision. So I would say that my job at Blackheart is to at least give people an opportunity to look into things and make their own decisions on what they want to, believe, or what they want to agree on, because ultimately there's going to be a referendum and the Australian people need to either say yes or no, right? So there's a big piece of work that's happening in the background. But in terms of your community, are people interested and want to know what you do? And do you have these yarns when you're just trying to have a coffee down the shop, or you're visiting your sister's gallery? Like, do you find yourself having yarns with mob, just everyday mob or people in your community about the work that you do? Do you find that there's, this curiosity or interest from our mob to want to know more? Or is it just with, non-Indigenous Australians in corporate Australia?
Yeah, definitely have the conversations, and there's definitely curiosity about it, and it comes in different forms. So we know that not every Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander person has heard about the Uluru Statement and has been engaged around that, and that's understandable. So there's obviously more work to be done between now and the referendum, and we know that needs to happen and to bring people up to speed. But whether they're talking about the Uluru Statement in a voice, or whether they're talking about issues in their own communities and the need for our mob to be more involved in decision making, to have a greater say, or expressing it the other way, like a frustration that people that have no idea about our communities and no idea about how our families and mob work on the ground are making decisions about us without us. So this has been the interesting thing. I've heard this a few times. People have come up to me at times and said, mob will come up to me and goes, I know you work with that Uluru Statement and I want to tell you that I disagree with it. And I go, okay, yeah, cool. That's, we all got different views. Do you reckon, let me ask you this then, do you reckon our mob should have more of a say, more of a voice over the things that are important to us? Yeah, of course. And do you reckon, that we should be talking about things like treaty and that? And mob should be sitting down with governments and doing treaties? Yeah, of course, big supporter. And what about, things like telling the truth about the Australian history? Well, of course, we've got to tell the truth. That's not being done right now. So the instinctive reaction might be against the idea of the Uluru Statement, not exactly as you say, not knowing what it means, but the components within it. Nobody's going to argue with those things, that this is what we need, that these are the things that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have been talking about for a very, very long time. So I'm okay with the idea that there are some people out there, and let's just burst the bubble for those people that think that mob think 100% the same on all of these things all the time. We don't. We think we've got different views, just like every other community. We're still battling with this misconception that blackfellas have to think the same way, and then think that when we have a different view, that somehow represents division. There's a too quick of a leap from mob having a different view to it being cast as blackfellas are divided. And we've got to resist that. We've got to resist that, because that's an old tool, That's a really old tool that goes back a long, long way, because the longer that blackfellas are divided, the last thing we want them to do is actually come together and be in a united force. So there's a lot of pressure to sort of move that way. And I think as mob, we've got to be attuned to that. We've got to be attuned and say, well, we're able to have different ideas. We're allowed to have different views. We're allowed to have very strongly different views. But we should not let ourselves be played into narratives that say, well, that is an example of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander division, because that's not helpful for anybody. The one thing I will say about I've got a lot of things to say, obviously, but
this is where we want to hear him.
the one thing I'll say about this question of division, or not division, of difference of opinion. Yeah. Of course, that's who we are. We've got mob that'll have different views and everything. But if we accept that, and we should, and respect it, we also got to accept and respect when a consensus emerges. We have to. We can't just say it's all just about difference of opinion. We've got to look at those moments in time where the mobs have come together to make something, have unified around an idea. And that's why I say we can accept and respect differences of opinion around the Uluru Statement, but we've also got to acknowledge and respect the consensus that emerged out of the Uluru Statement and that whole process as well. It was historic. It doesn't happen very often. And mob did a lot of work. They did a lot of work. They set aside a lot of cynicism and doubt that would be taken seriously, that this would just be another exercise that gets ignored yet again. They articulated that through this process. Some of our people that have been around for a long, long time and seen these things done before, been involved in processes that have been rejected before, and yet they still came to the table and gave everything for the Uluru Statement. So when we say we respect the difference of opinions, we can do that, and we must also just acknowledge and respect this enormous contribution and consensus that came out of the Uluru Statement from the Heart is something I'm very proud to be part of.
Wow. And what about now if we flip it over to mainstream Australia, corporate Australia? You know, you've got PwC that have publicly signed up. You've got all the law firms that have most law firms that have publicly signed up. I'm not too sure if the big banks have publicly signed up, but what have you seen with these big organisations making it public that they support the Uluru Statement from the Heart? Like, how do you get these big organisations first on board, and what do you think the impact of that is going to be? Why is it important to have these big institutions supporting the Uluru Statement from the Heart?
Well, I'll say a couple of things around this. Our focus, as the Uluru Statement's focus has always been, around the people, and that includes mob, obviously, but also non-Indigenous people. In a way, the corporates are important, but they're only important insofar as they can help us facilitate conversations with people across the country. This isn't about getting This isn't about getting a big list of brands on a piece in a newspaper and saying, look at all of these companies that are supporting. The real value is saying these companies employ hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of Australians who will be voters at a referendum. What is it that they can be doing? Not necessarily putting their names up in the lights, but what is it that they can be doing to help get this message and this information out through the networks and the people that they employ. So it's not necessarily about showcasing the companies per se. It's about how can they help us facilitate a movement of Australian people that get behind and support this. So that's definitely the way that we've been approaching it. How they've got to this point, we've got to acknowledge that none of what we do, certainly none of what we do through the Uluru Statement is just because of what we've achieved. There's been work done with reconciliation for decades. Reconciliation Australia has done a lot of work, and a whole bunch of different organisations that have been on that journey that have done a really lot of hard, ground level work trying to get organisations on board. And this is the thing about how movements work. It's the same thing that happened, for example, with the marriage equality movement that we saw with the successful plebiscite a few years ago. By the time the vote came around, people were looking at each other and going, this is just the obvious thing to do. But 5 years before that, or 10 years before that, it was not the obvious thing to do. It was the controversial thing to do. It was the minority position thing to do. And 20 years before that, 30 years before that, in the marriage equality case, it was the illegal thing to do.
I was about to say it was against the law, yeah.
It was against the law. So these moments when it all comes together and it all just seems like, and we're approaching one of those moments now. We are very close to that moment with Uluru in particular. The first reform, getting a referendum up on a voice, which is my particular focus. We're getting to a point with companies, with people, with organisations, with just conversations with the media, where it's starting to get to that point of this is just an obvious thing. Let's just get on and do it. It's just an obvious thing to do. And there are literally thousands of people and hours and dedication and commitment and hard yards and grind that have built up to this moment. So the companies are there because people have done the work. People have done the work and got knocked back, done the work and been cautiously welcomed, and now done the work and starting to see organisations really wanting to jump on board, and individuals jump on board. And some of the individuals are coming from really unlikely areas. And I'd say this for everybody listening with our particular cause, and I think it applies to anything that our mob are trying to do or change, whether it's trying to win a referendum on a voice or get better healthcare or whatever. We've got to assume that we can win people and convince people. We've actually got to go in with a mindset that says we've got a chance of shifting opinion here, or we've got a chance of actually getting a really strong support. If we go in with the mindset that we've got no hope, or that the situation's too hopeless, or that people are too racist, they won't support something, then we're approaching it from a position where we're expecting to lose.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to approach it from a situation where we believe with real conviction that we can win. It's not about being naive. It's not about sort of putting your blinkers on to all the risks and all the challenges, but you've got to have a sense of belief that this is something that we can win. And so I just ask everybody when they're thinking about trying to do whatever change it is I've learned that, and that's not me being particularly intelligent or whatever. I've learned that from other people, especially older people, around saying we've got to back ourselves on these things. If we don't back ourselves on these things, how can we expect anybody else to follow us?
Exactly. I was just going to say, having that mindset rubs off on other people around you. So everyone working in your space and the people that you're engaging with that are all feeling like, winners, and we've got this, like, wouldn't that be amazing just to be surrounded by like-minded people that all feel this sense of, it's not success, but a sense of, positivity, like to go in there with a positive mindset and not dwell on the past and all of the things that have happened historically that have never gone in our way. Most things have never gone our way. We are citizens now in our own country, but that was a big effort on the, one of your Quandamooka people, Uluru Nunako. She was one of the main people, with people like Faith Bandler. There was a whole lot of people that went around the country and spoke to the Australian people and said, do you know that Aboriginal people are not, not enrolled to vote, or they're not citizens? Like, they went around and educated people and rallied up that support from the people. So this is just like, us becoming citizens in our own country. To have a voice to Parliament means that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people hopefully will have that self-determination. And it's also, when you think about the United Nations Declaration, UNDRIP, the United Nations Declarations of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, self-determination and self-government or governance, right? That consensus decision-making, that mob come together and reach consensus, that's Aboriginal governance. And I love the fact that, that there might have been 3 or 4, maybe a handful of people that might have walked out from coming together, but majority that did stay, everybody reached agreement. And also with funding, like people putting money towards this movement, is there any philanthropic dollars being thrown at the state from the hunt? Because I know when it was initially thought of, there was no funding. And a lot of people I know that I've spoken to seem to think it's a government-driven initiative, or it's a government agenda. So can you let our listeners know, and even some people that might be listening that want to put their time or effort or energy or their money, if they're in a position, can you let us know if there's an opportunity to support the campaign for people that are listening, and then for our mob to know, where does majority of the funding come to keep people like yourself, not just employed, but to keep the whole thing moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So no, we are completely and utterly independent from government. We have not and will not accept a single cent of government funding for this process. Our job is to keep pushing on what Mob have said through the Uluru Statement from the Heart. So we've got to be arm's length from government. We're going to be holding them to account. So we're independent, fiercely independent. We've received some wonderful support from philanthropic organisations. The Ian and Shirley Norman Foundation is one that springs to mind, that come on board, that just jumped on board and backed our campaign. These are people that are just inspired by what Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have said. They want to see happen and get behind what we're doing. Corporate Australia is starting to really come on board now. I think they're starting to see the opportunity to get in and not just support the campaign financially, but, as I said, provide the channels to their employees to make sure that we can get information out to them and educate as many people as we can. And the thing that's been mind-blowing has been the individual grassroots donations to the campaign. You can donate through our campaign website, fromtheheart.com.au. And that, I'll say this, even more than the money, the idea that Australians from all walks of life, from all different ethnicities, all different backgrounds, are not just saying that they support this, but in very small ways chipping in and supporting the campaign. As someone that's involved in it, as I say, more than seeing the dollars come in, it's the backing us. It's the statement that says we support you and we really mean this. It's just phenomenal. So that's been an incredible thing to see. So how we're set up as a project of the Cape York Institute, and we've done that very deliberately because we need to be able to get donations to support this work. You need an organisation that has the necessary charitable status. We looked to set up our own independent organisation, and we're not able to do that. So we ran this as a project of the Cape York Institute. We have our own separate arrangements. 100%. So every single 100% of every single dollar that is donated for the campaign gets spent on the campaign. There's no money that goes elsewhere. We've got our own bank accounts. It goes straight in. So everything that people give goes straight into the campaign to help us drive this as much as we can. We've got a really deadly group of advisors that sit around. Noel Pearson's one, Karen Mundine from Reconciliation Australia, Tyrone Garstone from the Kimberley Lands Council, Thomas Mayer, Samara Jose from Dig. She's another one you've got to get on your podcast if you haven't already. Yep. Deadly Inspiring Youth Doing Good.
Yep, Clint, you got that?
Samara's brilliant. Tanya Hosh, Tanya's involved.
We had Tanya on here, so yeah, deadly.
Oh, she's
I know, too deadly. Yeah.
So we've got some amazing people. Danny Gilbert from the law firm Gilbert and Tobin, and Mark Texter from CT Group is providing political strategy support for the campaign. So we've got a very good outfit. We're independently run. We're independently advised, and look, we're just trying to. Anybody who's interested in joining us, jump on the website and get involved in whatever way works for you, because we're going to win this through people power in the old-fashioned way of individual Australians saying that this is something that they're prepared to support, and we're hugely encouraged. The numbers are very much in our favour. The public support is there. We've done our own research and polling over a number of years. It's growing. So I'd encourage people to get involved.
Too deadly. And what a way to wrap up our yarn today by asking people to go to the website. Is it Statement from the Heart or From the Heart?
Fromtheheart.com.au.
This will be in the show notes as well, so we're not going to confuse you. But go to the website, have a look at the resources, and in particular, if you are an organisation, how can you educate your staff? Because I think the way that I first found out about organisations being committed is organisations were reaching out to Black Card saying, can you help us understand the Statement from the Heart? And I'm like, hold a minute. I can't deliver a session on a topic that I have no idea about. So I got Thomas on, I got Megan on, I've got yourself on, and I'm now able to point people to my podcast to listen to this yarn and hear kind of firsthand on what this is about, what the campaign's about, and then how they can get involved. So look, my brother, I just want to say thank you so much for finding an hour, taking time out of your busy schedule to join me on this podcast. I appreciate everything that you've shared with us, and I really do hope that we can yarn again and give us an update if that's okay with you.
That'll be lovely, and I promise to do it from home next time. So
yes, and show us that beautiful country.
Bit of background, yeah.
All good.
Awesome.
And I just want to say, get over and see Quandamooka country. Go and support Black businesses that are living on country, like Sister Delvine Cockatoo Parkins and my sister and her amazing partner Paddy Coolwell, that are also, trying to do the best that they can in these circumstances with this global pandemic. So yeah, look, if you're in Brisbane, it's not even 20 minutes on a ferry to get over and absolutely just see paradise. So on that note, I'll let you go. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon and say hello to your partner, Carla, for me. Yeah, I hope to catch up soon and meet you in the flesh.
Absolutely. Come over.
I am. I'm coming. Oh, good, bros. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you. You too.
Yeah, well.
Thanks, Mara.
I know I say this after every single podcast, but how amazing was the brother living overseas, all the jobs that he's done, going back home and actually living back on country, coming from an amazing family, sister Steph, Parkin, Delvine. I haven't met the big brother yet, but absolutely love the fact that even my kids are Quandamooka countries, and I didn't even mention, so big shout out to Garland and Kasaya, who are Delaney's and Curry, so connected and related to Dean's family. So we're all connected, us black fellas in one way or another. But look, Dean's been closely involved in the process that resulted in the historic Uluru Statement from the Heart. He continues to advocate for constitutional and structural reform as the director of From the Heart. Formerly an investment analyst at alternative asset investment firm Tanarra Capital, Dean also has extensive experience in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander affairs. He has consulted across the Pacific, corporate, not-for-profit and political sectors at national, regional and local levels. He has also advised a range of clients on strategy, engagement and co-design, and has commercial experience both in Australia and the UK. Dean is of the Quandamooka peoples of Minjerribah, aka North Stradbroke Island, here in Queensland, and as he mentioned, has a Bachelor of Arts, but also a graduate certificate in education from the University of Melbourne. He is a senior fellow of the Atlantic Fellowship for Social Equity and is an ex-officio member of the Business Council of Australia's Indigenous Engagement Taskforce. So unbelievable. And get involved. Have a look at the show notes. Jump on the website From the Heart. Have a look at what Thomas Mayer and Professor Megan Davis, or listen to the podcast. There's some yarns there that I've had with other people that have spoken about their involvement with the Uluru Statement from the Heart. So, yeah, until next time, bye for now.
Don't forget to follow Black Magic Woman podcast on all social media platforms. To keep up to date with the latest episodes and news, head to blackmagicwoman.com.au. You can rate and review the podcast on iTunes, and please feel free to share the podcast with your family and friends.